I take my text this morning from Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. I want to begin with my favorite irreverent take on this beatitude. It is from Monty Python's brilliantly funny and insightful movie, Life of Brian. The scene, I can tell some of you remember, is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Those at the very back of the crowd are having trouble hearing. One woman asks, "What did he say?" A man a little closer to Jesus says, "I think it was, 'Blessed are the cheesemakers.'" The woman says, "What's so special about the cheesemakers?" To which her husband archly replies, "Well, obviously it's not meant to be taken literally. It refers to any manufacturers of dairy products." I think I, too, may not quite have heard at first the deeper meaning of the actual, apparently simple blessing. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. When I thought about this beatitude in the past, I wasn't sure what more there was to say or consider. Peace is good, and we will be blessed if we help create it. I think I had in mind a vague picture of really nice, calm people getting other people who were arguing to stop. More recently, I have come to believe that that picture does not take into account at least three more profound aspects of our good intention to bring peace to the world. First is the courage it may take to be a peacemaker. Second is the tension between peace breaking and peacemaking. Third is the connection between finding personal inner peace and bringing peace to the world. I like Rick Ezel's reminder that the scripture does not say, "Blessed are the peace wishers," or the peace hopers, or the peace dreamers, or the peace talkers. Peace must be made. So a peacemaker is never passive. They are up and doing, Ezel says. Sometimes the act needed from a peacemaker is an act of courage, sometimes great courage. The story of the monk Telemachus inspires me. We know his story from a book entitled Ecclesiastical History, a history of the early Christian church written by Theodoret, Bishop of Cyrrhus in Syria. However, I want to use the story partly as President Ronald Reagan expanded and dramatized it in a speech in 1984. Very late in the 4th century, the Asian Christian monk Telemachus lived in a little remote village. He had embraced an ascetic life, so he spent most of his time in prayer or tending the garden from which he obtained his sustenance. And then one day he thought he heard the voice of God telling him to go to Rome. He traveled most of the way there on foot. He finally arrived weeks and weeks later during a festival in Rome. They were celebrating a triumph over the Goths. Telemachus followed a crowd into the stadium. There, in the midst of this great crowd, he saw the gladiators come forth, stand before the official presiding over the games, and say, "We who are about to die salute you." And he realized they were going to fight to the death for the entertainment of the crowds. Telemachus cried out, "In the name of Christ, stop!" But his voice was lost in the tumult in the huge stadium. As the games began, Telemachus made his way down through the crowd, climbed over the wall, dropped to the floor of the arena. Suddenly, the crowd saw this scrawny little figure making his way out to the gladiators, saying over and over again, "In the name of Christ, stop!" They thought it was part of the entertainment, and at first they were amused. But then, when they realized it wasn't, they grew belligerent and angry. And then the spectators stoned the peacemaker to death. When the Emperor Honorius was informed of what had happened, he named Telemachus one of the victorious martyrs, and he put an end to that impious spectacle, as Theodoret tells us. That was the last battle to the death between gladiators in the Roman Empire. Never again did men kill each other in the arena for the entertainment of the crowd. Most times, the courage required to bring peace into our everyday lives is much less dramatic. But it still requires something of us. There is often some price to be paid. Those who would bring peace to others at least have to wade willingly into conflict, give up some measure of quiet and calm in their own private lives. I would like to forget that part often. But then I'm reminded that there's no effort and no point to bringing peace where it already exists. Peacemakers bring peace where it is not, where it can be difficult. The second aspect of being a peacemaker that I had not paid enough attention to is that there is a tension, I think, between when we break peace and when we make peace. It depends on the peace we're talking about, doesn't it? If the calm or peace we know is grounded in injustice, our prophets tell us we must break it for ourselves, others, and our society. I'm certainly not talking about breaking anyone's peace violently or purely for selfish reasons. But the monk Telemachus had to break the peace. He had to disturb the status quo of Roman society to stop the practice of meaningless death as entertainment. Sometimes an old peace must be broken to make room for a better peace. Sometimes our task as people who care about all of us is to remake peace, always using peace to bring peace. This is the call to nonviolent action that leads to a peaceful but newly just world. Jesus, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, the great peacemakers we celebrate, did not keep peace at any cost. Where peace existed only because some were oppressed, they were peace breakers, troublemakers. They did not avoid either personal transformation or societal transformation. They insisted on it. The result was that many others were disturbed from the peace they had known. Many who clearly hear the messages of these peace champions still have their own peace disturbed by the call to a new reality of a just peace. I am one of those. As the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, there ought to be some things in our social system to which all of us are maladjusted. I never intend to adjust myself to the evils of segregation and the crippling effects of discrimination, he wrote. I never intend to adjust myself to the inequalities of an economic system which takes necessities from the masses to give luxuries to the classes. I never intend to become adjusted to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating method of physical violence. The people the world think of as great peacemakers have been able to break an unjust peace without violence, and then they have remade a peace with justice. As Jane Addams told us, true peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice. This is the strength and the coherence of our sixth UU principle. It promotes and affirms the goal of world community with peace and liberty and justice for all. The third and last aspect of being a peacemaker I want to explore this morning is the connection between finding personal peace and bringing peace to the world. I really don't know how collective peace can begin without people who know and have peace in their own lives. What Eckhart Tolle said always made sense to me on some level. It is inner stillness that will save and transform the world. I am coming to the belief that there is less separation and closer connection between personal peace and world peace than I had thought. Do you know the story of Mahagosananda? He has been called the Gandhi of Cambodia. Matthew Weiner, a doctorate candidate in ethics at Union Theological Seminary, writes, during the past century, nearly every Asian country with a majority Buddhist population experienced civil war, foreign invasion, or systemic poverty and tyranny. Some Buddhist leaders responded with unique forms of social engagement. The Dalai Lama's response to the crisis in Tibet, Thich Nhat Hanh's response to the war in Vietnam, are both obvious examples. In the face of severe oppression, these leaders acted with tremendous force and creativity in a manner that epitomizes the nonviolent social action called engaged Buddhism. Less attention has been given to a Buddhist movement in Cambodia, one of the most devastated countries of modern times. Some 2 million Cambodians were killed during the Khmer Rouge period. And the Buddhist religion itself was targeted for elimination. Monks were killed or forced back into lay life. Most temples were destroyed or desecrated. The most significant Buddhist response to the war came in the person of a quiet monk named Samdech Preah Mahagosananda, who emerged from a decade-long retreat to help survivors. Gosananda's activism rebuilt Cambodian Buddhism, teaching peace through example. Completely nonpartisan, he offered his ministry even to members of the Khmer Rouge. His activism culminated in the famous Dhammayatras, peace walks through war-torn, landmine-infested areas. This bold undertaking brought Gosananda international acclaim. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 5 times. It was during Mahagosananda's secluded 9-year forest retreat in 1975 that the Khmer Rouge gained power. As news of the genocide spread, he was grief-stricken. Like all Cambodian survivors, he suffered great losses. His entire family, including 16 siblings, were killed. In 1979, Vietnam invaded Cambodia. Within days, Gosananda emerged from his retreat. He was one of the few surviving senior monks, and he was received as a saint-like figure by many refugees. He began his work in the form of Buddhist ministry and restoration. He established simple shack temples in every refugee camp. He taught mediation and the need for inner peace. Because of this, Gosananda was not welcomed by many camp authorities, especially the Khmer Rouge factions. But he insisted on nonpartisanship and nonviolence, keeping a no-weapons rule in his temples. By doing so, he established the only respected neutral space that refugees had for moral and spiritual sustenance. The first of many Dhammayatras began in the refugee camps on the Thai border. They traveled through the Khmer Rouge territory and highly contested land and ended in Phnom Penh. The initial walkers were 100 refugee Cambodians, but hundreds of local supporters joined it as it proceeded through the countryside. It was a testament to their eagerness for peace. Both poor villagers and soldiers joined the march or received blessings from the monks. Soldiers laid down their arms and explained to the walkers that they did not want to kill anymore. Ghosananda's social teachings were perplexingly simple. He spoke almost exclusively about the need for inner peace to create social peace. All agreed that the most important thing he offered was his peaceful mental state. When asked what he did in the refugee camps in his shack temple when there was, quote, nothing to do, close quote, his response was characteristically simple. I was seeking peace, so I would have something to give to others. Interviews with coworkers focus on his state of consciousness or his character. This is most poignantly exemplified both by his remarkably consistent peaceful state and by his transformative presence. Mahaghosananda was described as radiant, peaceful, gentle, occasionally eccentric, and prone to quizzical, Zen-like answers. Thus, while respected for what he said and did, he is primarily respected for how he was. His teachings were spontaneous and often humorous, yet they were relentless in their consistent return to first principles, particularly living in the moment. He was fond of saying, here, this, now, as a way of focusing attention on the present. Here, this, now. He was reported to speak 16 languages and often gave Dharma talks in 4 languages simultaneously. But he often gave one-word or single-sentence answers throughout an interview. An interviewer asked him, in your life, you must have had several very special moments. Yes. Could you tell us about a few of them? All of the moments. A typical example that demonstrated his nonpartisanship came from an interview conducted during a walk for peaceful elections. Why are you walking? We walk for peace, so there will be a peaceful election. Who do you hope wins? Peace wins. Can you elaborate? No. Ghosananda upset both social activists and traditionalists. That was because he saw no contradiction between bringing peace to Cambodia and striving toward internal peace. He saw a necessary codependence between the two. I received my own blessing of peace this past week. I had said something stupid that hurt another member of our family. Last Wednesday night, she wrote an email expressing how hurt she was. The email came to me and other family members, one of whom was my nephew, JP. He is a remarkably empathetic person, feeling the hurts and needs of others at least as well as anyone I know. And he takes it upon himself to do something to help. So when JP read the hurting email from our other family member early Thursday morning, he immediately wrote her a beautiful, sensitive reply. I had had a short and not very restful night, worrying, too late, about the hurt I'd caused. JP said that he knew I would. He was willing to wade into my conflict with the other family member. By doing so sensitively to both of us, JP healed the rift and brought us peace. After reading JP's email, the other family member was able to forgive me, and I received that gift of forgiveness, a gift of grace. I blessed JP in my heart for that and for his follow-up phone call. And I blessed my niece Heather, JP's sister, for her comforting phone calls on Thursday too. Peacemakers reconcile peace with each other. They reconcile people with each other. They also reconcile people with their best selves and highest principles. they are truly children of God, heirs of the divine spark. I believe they both bless and are blessed when they soothe others in distress, bring peace to those in conflict, bring comfort to those who are suffering. They do so by overcoming the desire not to be troubled, maybe by overcoming their fear. This is what I wish for myself, not to avoid conflict, but to help heal it, to wade into places of suffering willingly without being caught up in what is causing the suffering, to bring more light and less heat to conflict, to be willing to break an unjust peace and then remake a peace where all receive justice, to be so filled with inner peace that I have something to give to others. As St. Francis of Assisi prayed, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. May it be so for all of us.